Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we are going to talk about media mix modeling. Let's get straight into it. Whenever your marketing is being assessed by an analyst, they're going to use one of two approaches. The first is called multi-touch attribution, and that takes a customer who's made a purchase decision and then looks back, putting weights on the touch points they had on various channels on the way to that purchase. That's to say, which touch points were most influential. Now, there's a few different models for this. First click, last click. Google calls theirs data-driven attribution. The other approach they may use is media mix modeling. From what previous podcast guest Kevin Hartman told me about media mix modeling, or MMM, it's a tremendous undertaking. It involves collecting historical data in different geographies at different times of the year, sales figures, legacy, digital marketing channels, external factors like economic indicators, and even weather. For it to do its analysis, we get into some really weird jargon: incrementality, ratios, betas, top-down analyses, impact on objectives. Oh, and then there's the math. It uses regression methods, both linear and nonlinear, Frequentist, and Bayesian statistics sometimes. I get so overwhelmed with these modeling solutions, it's like the old who's on first skit.
I'm going to throw Valentine out of first base, so I pick up the ball and throw it to who?
Now, that's the first thing you said right.
I don't even know what I'm talking about! That's all you have to do.
I needed someone who would sort this out for me. Our guest has been a consultant in the marketing and digital analytics space for 15 years. He is so passionate about attribution methodologies that he started a newsletter called MMM Hub. He's great at showcasing other people in the analytics community, and he truly believes that all of us are smarter than any one of us. Case in point, he, along with Simon Polton, co-host the Measure Up podcast. He's a graduate of Carnegie Mellon with a master's degree in information technology focused on business intelligence and data analytics, and he currently has his own consulting practice. Speaking with me from his home in Pittsburgh, let's go meet Jim Gianoglio. Welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thank you. It's great to be on here. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure thing. I'm glad to have you. We are going to talk today about how to measure the way that our marketing spend works. And this comes back to some pretty simple stuff, but you are going to help us take a trip down the rabbit hole to see how far we can go. I'll start with a very brief story. I was working for a while for a large B2B company, and we had to meet with the VP of sales. And we had just started working with them. This was for doing some paid ads, some digital ads. And so we presented some of what we had, and the marketing people were in the room, and it was mentioned how much the marketing budget was. And the VP of sales looked at the number of leads that were coming in, and he turned to the room and said, "Hey, if we spent X and we got Y number of leads, what would happen if we spent 4X?" All I can say is that the meeting went sideways from there.
Yes.
There was a lot of things said, but there was no consensus. And the more that people spoke, the less and less we seemed to know about this subject. Were we the only ones that came across that, or is this a pretty common thing?
I would say that's pretty common. It's one of the questions that people have is, I spent $100,000 and I got $400,000 in return. Well, if I double that, shouldn't I get $800,000 in return? And Well, I don't want to dive too much into the rabbit hole too far at the beginning, but that's the concept of diminishing returns, which I think most marketers kind of intuitively understand that, right? It's,
Right.
the first dollars in are more efficient. The more you spend in a channel, the less efficient it gets. But yeah, I mean, it's a common question, a common challenge that people start to have, and it starts to sort of unravel some things in their minds. And I think this, like you said, the conversation went a little sideways and maybe talked in circles a little bit. That happens a lot. Yeah.
So there is a discipline that has grown up to look after this. Let's first take it simply within this one channel. Okay. So when people are doing this, would it be fair, Jim, to say that the answer in a single channel can be you can at least explain the principle behind diminishing returns? For example, if we're talking about a social media, paid social. So we can say, for example, on LinkedIn, that LinkedIn can only show an ad to your target market as often as the people in the target market log into LinkedIn and start scrolling.
Exactly.
And to the point where LinkedIn is showing that ad too many times, they get annoyed and they leave. So that's kind of theirs. Or in paid search, it might be, well, there's only so many people in this geography that type in that query. So the keyword that matches it will only be eligible so many times. Does this happen in other marketing mediums besides digital? Is there the same thing happening in offline, outdoor, or some of the traditional mass media channels?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, easy example is TV, right? It's, you could even think of it in a national spend. Like there's only 300 million people in the country. Well, in the United States, sorry.
Yeah.
There's a limited capacity. There's a certain market size that you're going to cap out at some point. And maybe you're just doing regional spend and it's, even smaller than that. But at a certain point, you're dealing with your target market size and frequency. Like those are the two big levers that we're talking about, right? It's at a certain point, there's only so many people that are going to see our ad. And then how many times are they going to see it? Right. And so at the beginning, you have this big pool of people that potentially can see your ad. And so like every dollar you put in, you're reaching potentially new people who haven't seen it yet. But the more you spend, the harder it is to reach new people, or you're just reaching the same people over and over again. So it's reaching that point at which that the second time someone sees your ad, it might be like, oh yeah, that company, I need to check that out. And the third time it might be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I need to go and check that out. But the 27th time they're like, ugh, this thing again. Same thing. TV, billboards, right? Like you drive by a billboard on a road. There's only so many people who are driving on that road in a given period of time. And yeah, maybe occasionally you have some tourists that drive by and see it for the first time, but that's the small percentage of people.
Sure. So there's this kind of power curve.
Yeah.
A younger me thought in my naivety that when you maxed out that one channel, that all you had to do to get more, what would please that sales VP would be to find another channel that has other people. And I assumed that they would all be new people. But the older and wiser me who's done this has learned instead of that actually making my life simpler, it makes it harder because they're not all new people. They're some of the self-same people that were in the first channel. And so now I'm into this whole new wacky analysis of, well, if I got a purchase out of one of them, which channel was it?
Oh, who gets credit? And then we dive down the slippery slope of multi-touch attribution, and I mean we could go down that road a little bit, and we could talk about why that's faulty or the kind of the drawbacks of that.
Take us there.
I feel like this has sort of been a little bit of a soapbox that I've been on for the past several years, trying to get marketers and analysts to kind of look at multi-touch attribution with eyes wide open and try to see it for what it is, which it still can be valuable, but it's not the panacea that all of the vendors have claimed it has been for the past decade. I feel like back when Google first introduced multi-channel funnels reports, that was kind of like that initial the drug dealer giving us that first hit for free. And then ever since then, we've all been like, we need more. And we kind of like just abandoned all logic and just assumed that what they were telling us was true. So multi-touch attribution is this idea that we can track a user, a person, a human being. We can see all of the interactions they've had with our ads, the ads they saw, the ads they clicked on, the ones that brought them to our site until they eventually purchased or filled out the lead form or whatever it is. And if you even just think about it before privacy regulations and technology changes like GDPR, even before then, right? So the best possible scenario before things started to erode, let's think about 2016, we still had people on their smartphones, on their tablets, on their laptop, on their computer, their work computer, their home computer. Like people were still using many devices, multiple devices. And so the ability to track that person, which we know in digital tracking, it's cookies on a device, cookies on a browser. Our ability to track all of our interactions that user had with our ads is limited. And people kind of just glossed over that and forgot about that. So like that's the first point, is that it's always been a bit of a fallacy that we could track everything that a user did. Maybe it was good enough to give us some good directional guidance, and that for that reason it was okay. But then you talk about GDPR and then all of the privacy regulations that have come after that with CCPA and all of the other in the United States, all of the other state level regulations. And those have had an effect for sure. I would say the bigger effect has been on sort of public perception and things that other companies have done, kind of tagging on to that perception of privacy and the marketing aspect behind that, and wanting to be seen as the privacy brand. Speaking, of course, here of Apple and all the changes they've made with ITP and ATT and iOS 14 and everything after that. So now our Google Analytics cookie that used to last 2 years now only lasts 7 days. So if someone comes to our site today from clicking on a paid search ad, they come to our site today, and then they come back 8 days later from some email marketing campaign. We have no idea that that's the same user that saw our paid search ad. And so again, our ability to kind of connect all of those touch points to a user has just kind of degraded completely. All of that's to say,
Yep.
that multi-touch attribution isn't the silver bullet that it's always been kind of promised to be. Again, it can still be used for some purposes, but there are other things that we as marketers and analysts need to start using to really understand how our marketing is performing.
Sure. And before we leave this to go to those, the other thing that it took me a while to understand is that the platform that I am seeing this multi-touch attribution report in is telling me everything from what it sees. So again, let's even play to the best case scenario. One device equals one user and cookies persisting, and imagining everything goes right. That platform is still only cognizant of what activity I'm using it for. So if I'm running, for example, on Facebook and on Google, neither of them is particularly keen to share with the other one the deep level information that would make attribution look across them. Now I can step outside of those and get a New Star or a Nielsen or Impact, some of those big tools, but they will also be at the mercy of what those platforms want to share with them. So we're getting a model that will have some imperfection and vagueness to it, no matter what we do. Am I right?
Exactly. And, even if you just take that example where someone's spending on Facebook and Google search, You can use a tool like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, and they have multi-touch attribution built into that, right? Where you can, if you're doing, you're tagging your campaigns on those platforms correctly with UTM campaign parameters or whatever it might be, you can see both of those platforms. The user clicks on your paid search ad, and then they click on your Facebook ad, and you can see that that's the same user. Um, but you don't see that they saw your TV ad and they drove past your billboard, and maybe they got your direct mailer and whatever else that's not digital, right?
Right.
So that's the
Okay.
other piece is what we've been using. Digital marketers have been using has been only digital marketing and doesn't
Sure.
consider anything else that might be in play.
So I really like what you said there about your intended purpose. So let's give it just a bit of its due. Multi-touch attribution can, for example, be useful if you intend to find out where your first click, maybe last click, and if you're lucky, some middle of funnel click is contributing directionally to some good. So marketers can, for example, use those sorts of things. So long as those models are provided by the platform, we're in a point now where with Google Analytics, where they are removing some of those different models, leaving us with their data-driven attribution, which is a black box, and I think last click. So
Yeah. Thanks, Google, for taking those away. It's funny their messaging around that was that, well, people weren't using the other models anyway, so we just took them out. um, which I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they
yeah.
say.
So
Yeah.
so so it has its time and its place.
Mhm.
Let's go to one of the big things that I know you're a fan of, which can provide us some analysis that none of these things we've spoken of so far can do for us. What is that?
I think you're referring to the MMM acronym, marketing mix modeling, or sometimes media mix modeling, depending on who you're talking to. Yes.
What is it?
Okay. So I like to try to explain this at sort of a very high level, basic understanding. I try to put it into plain English because I feel that that's the most helpful for people. So I'm going to give like a high level definition and then sort of an example. So at a high level, right, it's a statistical approach. So I know I used statistical. So that's the first. I don't want people's eyes to glaze over just yet. We'll get better here. So it's a statistical approach. So it uses statistics to understand the relationship between a change in media spend and a change in sales or whatever other conversion you're interested in, right? So again, it's just looking at, oh, we spent more this week in this channel, and what happened with our sales? Oh, we spent less this week in this channel. What happened to our sales? And is there a relationship that we can start to see between our spend in this channel and what we get on the other side? So, one way to imagine this is, think about a line graph. Okay. So there's a line graph, a chart over time. Right? We're all familiar with our time series graphs from like Google Analytics. So imagine this time series graph has two lines on it, a blue line and a red line. And the blue line represents how much you spent in a particular channel, let's just say Facebook, every day. And so, you have it's going over, maybe has a little bit of spikes, some dips. And then the red line is how many sales you had each day, like total overall sales. And so as humans, we're very good at seeing patterns in data. Sometimes too good. Sometimes we see patterns that don't exist. We see spurious correlations. But just taking this simple example, we might see that the blue line spikes up on this day, and lo and behold, the red line spikes up too. And then we might say that, oh, the blue line went to zero for like 3 days because our ads got canceled because we used words we weren't supposed to use or whatever, and they got caught up in they got flagged for being against violation or whatever. So we lost, the blue line goes down to zero for 3 days, and we see the red line, it goes down too for those same 3 days, not down to zero obviously, but it definitely goes down. So we start to see these patterns between the blue and the red line, and that's very easy for us to see visually. Um, Now, it's not a perfect one-to-one relationship. Obviously, there are other factors in there, but that's in essence what marketing mix modeling is doing. It's finding those patterns between those two lines. And more specifically, it's basically creating a mathematical model that says, when this line goes up by this much, here's how much this other line's going to go up. It's trying to find that relationship between those two variables, basically.
Fair enough. So if I'm talking to a data science person, what words are going to come out of their mouth to describe the math that they're using to describe that? Are they going to say regression?
Regression, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It's that's another way I used to use or used to explain MMM. It's just, in essence, it's a multilinear regression, but I found sometimes that's that can turn some folks off too. So I just try to explain it as basically as possible. But yeah, I mean, that in essence, we're just running a regression for the most part. Now there are some other flavors too. You can get into Bayesian marketing mix modeling as well, which throws another little twist in there. But
right.
if you're comfortable thinking of it as a regression, that's good. And there are some other, that's the high level understanding of what MMM is doing. You can go underneath the hood, and there's a lot of other things happening as well.
Right. And at this point, I mean, what's important to note there is that a standard marketer shouldn't feel bad if they didn't take this in school, or if they're asked for it or they want to set up an MMM, that they may not have the requisite skills to do it. It will handle as complex a marketing scenario as you can throw at it, and it does that by with the help of some data scientists and some pretty heavy duty math.
Exactly. Yeah.
But let's.
I would also say too, like when I kind of first got into going down this rabbit hole of marketing mix modeling, when I started, I was kind of that same like, oh, this big scary thing that I'm sure is way more complicated and I don't understand it, and it's all this like fancy math and statistics and data science. But you once you go into it, you realize, oh, it's just a regression.
Right.
Okay, I got this.
Right. And a typical scatter plot could show me this. Yes.
Yeah.
Like you said, your human instincts are surprisingly able to follow what this is actually telling you. But to give people the full flavor, I've heard that things like promotions or weather or other seasonal factors can be thrown into this model, and that it will, without a hitch, keep pumping out the information to help us understand where our marketing dollars are best spent.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where you can get into sort of additional complexity, or what I've started to kind of segment in my mind. And I mentioned this earlier, that some people call it media mix modeling, other people call it marketing mix modeling. And I think the reason for the different terms, I think a lot of people think of media mix modeling and they think of, we're modeling just the media factors, right? How much I'm spending in various media. Whereas marketing mix modeling, if you think of marketing as kind of the full, 4 Ps, right? Price, placement, promotion, and product, you could do marketing mix modeling and include things like price changes and product attributes. And you can think of things that your clients or not your clients, your competitors' behaviors, right? Are your competitors changing aspects of their marketing or their product or their pricing? That can go into the model. You can look at macroeconomic conditions. You could look at things like COVID. You can model anything that you think has a significant impact or some impact on how much you sold or whatever your conversion is, right? So yeah, it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. In fact, Google put out a there's a GitHub page, and I don't know if I would call it, I guess, a white paper talking about something that they call regression-based attribution, or RBA, because they love their acronyms, their 3-letter acronyms. So RBA, regression-based attribution, and they said, that kind of fits this space between multi-touch attribution and marketing mix modeling. And really, it's just marketing mix modeling. The only difference is they're only using digital channels. right? So
Right.
it's
As if
just
there is nothing else. Yeah.
it's the same thing. Yeah, it's just MMM, but only pulling in your digital channels because the data is quick and easy to get. So I mean, all of this is kind of in the same realm.
Yeah.
It's just varying levels, right? It's a
Yeah.
spectrum.
And I think, unless to prevent people listening from thinking that, somebody ran off with, their answers, you can have data scientists, helping put these models together, but they will turn back to you and say, so are competitors a factor? Is weather a factor? And when they're asking these questions, that should make you feel good as a marketer because you are still an expert. You're a subject matter expert on the things that matter to your customer. So you shouldn't feel like you've been, it's been hijacked on you. You should feel like you still have involvement in how this goes, even if the parts that you're doing aren't as quantitative.
Exactly. And honestly, if you do have someone that's helping you out with marketing mix modeling, maybe you've hired a vendor or a consultant, and they're not going to your marketers and asking these questions, that is a huge red flag because it is 100% a collaborative project. The data scientists and statisticians very often don't have a marketing mindset
Right.
and very often don't understand how the marketing platforms themselves function, how things are architected within your paid search campaigns. If they're not asking how are you structuring your campaigns and paid search versus, and how are you structuring your campaigns in Facebook and TikTok and wherever
Yeah.
else? Are you targeting things geographically, or are you targeting based on branded versus non-branded, or are you targeting
Are you
based
using impression caps?
exactly? What's your objective? Are you doing like a ROAS objective, or are you doing impression based? Like, yeah, if they don't understand that, like they need to be asking those questions because that the whole point of using something like marketing mix modeling is so that you can pull the right levers in your platforms to make it more optimal, right? And if that lever that you need to pull is spend more in this region and less in that region, or spend more on this ad type and less on that ad type, that's what needs, that's what the model needs to take into account.
Right. And we're going to get right into those actions that you just teased a little bit there. But first, we're going to take a really quick break. We are now putting Funnel Reboot on another platform. It seems some people like to listen to their podcasts on YouTube. So you can now get episodes as they come out by going to the Funnel Reboot channel on YouTube. So, Jim, I'm going to come at this piece about what we're doing with our levers with a quote. So, it's a guy named John Wallace from Lift Lab, and he got me kind of excited about this idea, saying that in media mix modeling, I'm at least able to understand whether or not the last dollar of spend in a channel is covering its own. So he called it, like whether it's whatever it's generating is covering its own cost. And then he says, we love a double whammy where if you're looking at multiple channels, you can cut from one channel, which increases profit, and move it to another channel that was understated and it increases profit. So would you agree with that statement? Are there some really killer applications for this?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that statement. And John and the team at Lift Lab, they were doing some great things. And yeah, I mean that's sort of the holy grail of what we're trying to get at with marketing mix modeling is how do we optimize the budget allocation. So it's finding those channels that we're putting too much money in, and those other channels that maybe we're not investing enough in, that there's more efficiencies to be gained with a little bit more money, and shifting that budget around, right? And trying to find what is that optimal spend in each channel that gives us the most output, the most sales or leads or whatever it might be. So yeah, that double whammy where you take money out of this channel and put it into that channel, and this channel becomes more efficient, this channel gets more sales, and you kind of, it's a win-win.
Yeah. And back to our VP of sales, that's like a we went from 4x to 8x. Now I got to maybe push back a little bit on some things. And you actually started to refer to one of these when you talked about how the red line was going down, but it didn't go down to zero. So how does media mix modeling tackle this notion that there is some amount of purchasing that happens even if no ads are run? Is there a floor or a base? And is media mix modeling the only show in town for trying to explain how we drop, but we don't drop to zero?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so the first question is, how does media mix
How does
modeling
it
handle
handle it?
that, right? And so there is, when you build a model, whether however you're building it, generally what you'll have is a trend line or a baseline that says, here's the baseline of sales that you're getting based on historical, trend, seasonality, things like that. And this is the interesting thing that I first, when I first got into MMM, was like a little bit scary for me, because that baseline was usually around like 80 to 90%.
I mean,
And
I can see that in something like SaaS or like in your, cell phone plan.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to vary based on industry, vary based on the business itself, how well known it is, like how
Right.
much of a brand it's built up, right?
Market leader. Yeah.
Exactly. So, for the brands that I was working with, it was, 80-85% of sales would happen even if you didn't do any any advertising, right? Which is a scary thing to tell the marketers.
Yeah.
They don't like,
Right.
at least
I'm not going to have anything to do.
yeah, my feeling was that they were going to immediately reject it and say they didn't believe it, and it's all this mumbo jumbo statistics, and we don't believe it. It's black box, whatever. I was pleasantly surprised that they were like, "Yeah, that seems about right." I didn't give them enough credit. I think they're not as they're not deceiving themselves, or at least not all of them are.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, yeah, there is this concept in MMM of sort of the baseline sales, and I think the thing that's tricky is it's saying, okay, let's say 80% of sales would happen even if we shut off all of our media and all of our marketing. Sure, immediately you wouldn't lose everything, right? You would lose that 15 to 20% of sales from the top if you shut everything off. But then over time, it's going to trend down and down and down, right? Because all of your media, whether it's brand awareness or performance based marketing, is going towards kind of building that brand, right? And this is the thing that MMM is probably better suited to account for than most other measurement methodologies, but it's still not perfect yet. Is, how do you value the truly long term impact of all of your campaigns on that, that brand awareness and that brand building? That can be years and years of activity in the market and marketing activities that has kind of built that brand over time. And so that's something that's a little bit harder to model, but
Yeah. Am I right that ad stock, I've heard it also called ad carryover, is trying to model that?
yeah, absolutely. So ad stock, ad carryover, decay rate. That's when we talked at the beginning. I gave the very simple explanation. It's statistical modeling, and I said there's more complex things that can go into it under the hood, and this is one of those things, right? And again, what we're trying to do with the modeling, with marketing mix modeling, is trying to basically simulate what happens in the real world with mathematical functions, right? And so we know that if we spend $1 today in this channel, we're not always expecting that the sale is going to happen today, right? We know better than that. We might spend $1 today and someone sees our ad and they decide to just buy tomorrow or the next day or the day after that because they saw our ad. Or there might be this sort of decaying effect of our impressions of our ads that happen over time. And different channels might have different decay rates than others. You could think of, TV. Someone sees a TV commercial for a car and they don't buy for a month, or they might see, 12 commercials for Toyota, and that over time has that impression. And then when they are ready to buy a car, they remember, oh yeah, that Toyota, I'm going to buy that. Um, so ad stock is basically the way that we try to mimic reality, right? We have this assumption that this is how ads work, right? We expect that if someone sees an ad today, they're not going to immediately run out and buy. They might buy later. And we're trying to basically model that behavior.
Sure. Now, would it be fair? I'm going to mince words here, but in that example you just gave, perhaps would a truer way to describe MMM be to say, of all the people who watch Toyota ads and all the purchases that we see in that area of Toyotas? Because I've heard MMM described as a top-down, and you described multi-touch attribution as kind of imagining that one person watching it. Is that a good lens to use to keep these two straight in our heads?
Yeah, I think you'll often hear marketing mix modeling as referred to as a top-down approach versus MTA, which is a bottoms-up, where you're kind of going at the very granular level and kind of building your way up to attribution versus
Yep.
starting at the top and having sort of that aggregated data. I think that's probably a decent way to think about it, a decent lens to think about it through.
We haven't talked about incrementality, or at least used that word yet. Where do you say this fits in to the whole mix?
Yeah, incrementality is like the $1,000 word.
If you want to sound smart, you say it, but be careful, because you'll sound really dumb if somebody says, "Okay, what does that mean?"
Yeah. So here's how I think of incrementality. I think the way that I hope other marketers think about it is, how many sales did I get that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, right? So I spent X amount of dollars in Google paid search, and I got, Google search says I got 1,000 sales, with its, attribution modeling. But how many of those sales did I get that I wouldn't have gotten without those ads, right? Because some of those people were going to buy anyway, right? The easy example here to give, the one that everyone always picks on, is branded paid search, right? So I will go stick with Toyota. I don't know why I used them as an example, but it was top of mind. Someone types in Toyota Sienna into Google because they're looking for a new minivan, which, by the way, I love Siennas. Sorry, unpaid plug. Just the car that I have. They type in Toyota Sienna, and lo and behold, Toyota is paying to show up in the top spot with a sponsored ad. And because I'm lazy and I don't want to scroll down to the organic listing, I
Right.
click on the paid search ad.
And you end up buying, and
Yeah.
so you knew that a Toyota Sienna was a thing.
Yes, exactly. And I had cars is probably a bad example. Let's maybe think of like something a smaller thing that I would buy, like
Right. An impulse purchase or something. I've heard you're standing right near the checkout and you've got a bag of popcorn in your hand, and a little product rep jumps out of nowhere and says, "Buy our popcorn," and put it on the cash register and walk out. And that rep says, "Oh, I got another one."
Yeah,
No, they didn't.
Exactly. Or another good example I like is, you have a restaurant who's trying to increase their customers, their sales, and so the restaurant owner gives two of their employees coupons to hand out, and the one employee gives a bunch of green coupons, and the other employee gives a bunch of blue coupons, so they can know which employee did the best in handing out coupons. And the one employee goes all over town and handing out his green coupons all over to everyone. And the other employee is kind of smart and lazy like me. And they just stand by the front door handing out their blue
When
coupons
people walk in.
everyone who walks in. And the restaurateur says, "Wow, employee number 2 with the blue coupons, you did great. I'm going to give you more of, we're going to fire that other employee."
Okay.
What were they doing? Right. It's the same concept, right?
Fair. Now I have to ask, like, how on earth do you use a mathematical function to estimate that? Unless you're going to do a test where you, for a period of time, don't do it, and for a period of time you do it. That may be the answer. I don't know if it is, but I can tell you right now, most of the companies I work for, that's not going to fly.
Yeah. So I would say there's kind of two ways to get this question of incrementality. And that's one with marketing mix modeling. So when you do your modeling, right, it's saying, like, here's your base level of sales, and here's how many sales paid search contributed to or delivered, right? And so it's got incrementality built into it. It's not telling you had 100,000 sales and here's how we're going to assign all of those sales to the different channels.
No,
It's
it's
saying
not.
it's here's incremental conversions. The other way, if you really want to get sort of quote unquote ground truth, right? You really want to understand exactly the incremental nature of your channels, is to start running experiments. You'll hear these called randomized controlled trials, A/B tests,
Right.
conversion lift studies, geolift experiments, holdout tests. They go by so many different names, which is fun to keep track of all the terminology, but they're all basically the same thing. And to your point, yeah, this is where there can be some convincing to clients to say, we want to run an experiment so that we truly understand how much value this channel is providing. Because to some people think, oh, you mean I have to shut off all of my channel spend for a period of time? And that's one way of doing it. But there are other.
It doesn't have to be that draconian. No.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other part of this, though, that we start to go down, and it's really important, I think, for marketers to understand, is that the data, which is going to help you understand what your costs are, itself has a cost. So if you gave the example of RCTs, right?
Mhm.
Known as the gold standard of how you truly divine whether this caused that. You can do these things. They certainly are accurate. But as you move along this spectrum of, blunt and inaccurate to highly accurate and surgical, the cost of doing those things is higher. And you're going to hit this crossover point where it's just not worth me knowing to that level of accuracy, to the 9999%, 99.9% level. I'll cap it here and I'm good. But I had to make that decision based on what it was going to cost me to go further down that inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make that trade-off of how much do I think I'll gain from knowing this, versus how expensive is it to get that information. I would say in a lot of cases, for companies that are spending potentially, millions of dollars, then it's an easy trade-off because you have a lot more money at play. But if you're spending less, if you're spending maybe tens of thousands of dollars a
Right.
month, then go for the big tests, right? Go for, because you're going to have less data, right? You want to just do a big test to see a big result because you're going to be able to see that a lot easier. And that might be something like a holdout campaign where you just shut it off, or you
Yeah.
shut half of it off,
Or you use that accident that you said where, let's say, Facebook decided that your ads were in violation,
Yeah.
and you notice something like that after that unplanned event. You're like, wait a minute, that was actually yielding data that we can use.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And there are ways too that you can use those sort of events to do sort of causal inference. Again, if you have a data scientist on your team and someone who's ready to dive into R or Python and do like causal inference type of analysis, there are some really interesting advancements in the past few years around how you can do that with data that's already happened, basically.
Right. So yeah, we're running through all the things I really hoped we would. Python and R, of course, programming languages that are very well suited to changing the structure of a data set so that you can do some cool analysis on it. Jim, the question is, does a marketer have to learn Python and R to get these learnings? Do they have to have a data scientist who knows them on staff? I'll even throw in what's generative AI going to do with, being able to chug through these data sets without us having to write out each line of what's going on.
Ooh, I feel
Get
like
your
that's
crystal ball out.
a little bit of a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what the marketer wants to wants to do and how far they want to go. For someone who is, an operational marketer, someone who enjoys doing the creative messaging and getting into the tools and the Google search and the Meta and TikTok and like actually operationalizing the campaigns and that kind of thing. If they don't also truly love the numbers and the data side of things and the analysis side of things, then I would never say, yes, you need to learn R and Python and SQL and you have to do this because otherwise you're not good at your job. Like that's not the case, I don't think. I think there's a certain segment of marketers who really do enjoy the data and analysis side of things, and I would certainly encourage them to sort of explore that. I'd probably start with SQL and then pick either R or Python. Don't have to know them both. Either one is going to be fine. But I think it depends on the person and what they enjoy doing and what they're kind of good at doing, or maybe what they enjoy doing is best.
Yeah. And I love how you also put it in the lens of budgets and size of company, because in smaller companies, this may not be, you may not be at the level where the data needs that. Simply maybe dropping it into a spreadsheet and looking at some scatter plots and pivot tables. You may be able to get some relationship juice out of that without needing to get the big tools out. On that note, do you want to hazard a guess as to where, in terms of size, a company needs to be, where media mix modeling starts to make sense? Are there any rules of thumb around that?
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb that I like to use, and I've heard other people sort of hover around the same sort of area, is both in terms of how much you're spending and how many channels you have. So if you're just spending on Facebook and Google search, you don't need marketing mix modeling, right? You have two channels. You're going to very clearly see if you spend more in this channel, this is what you get. If you spend less in this channel, this is what, like two channels is not, you don't need any fancy statistics for that. If you're in the maybe 3-4 plus channels, and especially if you have offline channels, and you're spending, let's say, anywhere in the realm of $500 to $1 million a month plus, I would say that's probably a safe area where the money that you invest in MMM is going to be regained and then some, right?
Yeah, and that number can go as big as we want,
Yeah.
because it seems that the framework of MMM is flexible enough that it can handle even the most convoluted scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. Would you care to tell us how you came to be so fascinated by this area? I bet this isn't we're in grade 3 and it's, career day and, what does little Jimmy want to be when he grows up? I don't think you would have said, MMM. So, could you give us the short version of how you came to this?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've spent my adult career in digital marketing and analytics, and I seem to have always kind of bounced back and forth between the marketing side and the analytics side. I started off in SEO way back when, and then moved over to analytics proper, just focusing on Google Analytics and helping clients build measurement strategies and implement the tracking code on their sites, which used to be handing them a document of an 80-page document saying, here, put this JavaScript snippet at this location and this code of your site and this here. That didn't go over very
I was
well.
hoping you wouldn't bring that up. Yeah, those
Oh,
were
yeah.
painful.
Yeah, that was before tag management solutions. So that dates me a little bit. But then fortunately, Google Tag Manager and Tealium and all the others came out and made our jobs a lot easier. So I spent a lot of time sort of in that realm of digital analytics. And then decided to go back to school for data science, in essence. Got a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon University, and then kind of just floated around a little bit in the organization. I never kind of really fit in one place. I was always like on the data science team, but doing marketing related solutions, and I kind of bounced back and forth between marketing and analytics and data science. And so I was the bridge between those two a lot. And that's just, it went from there. And to me, there's no other singular, more important thing that someone with data science skills can answer for marketing other than, what's the performance of my marketing? Where should I put my budget? Like those big questions, right? That's
Wow. And I guess the rest was just a journey of self-learning, just being self-taught on, there's no part to this that I shouldn't be able to understand. So I'll just go ahead and teach it to myself.
Yeah. And, a lot of it is there's so many good resources out there now. Even just in the last few years, a lot of good resources out there. People like Mass Analytics putting out great video courses. There's Udemy courses on marketing mix modeling. Mike Taylor at VexPower has a lot of great courses for people to dip their toes into. There's just so much out there that, even if you're not a trained data scientist, like that shouldn't hold you back. There are a lot of things out there that you can start to understand this.
Yes. And so that topic isn't fully covered without touching on yours. So you have not only taught this to yourself, but you are actively sharing what you do. Can you tell us the hub through which you share what you're learning?
Yes, the hub is actually MMM Hub, which is something I started about a year and a half ago. So it's mmmhub.org, O-R-G. And it's a site that has some resources on it, and more so it's a weekly newsletter that I put out, just kind of trying to find out what are some good resources for people to learn MMM and other related topics like randomized controlled trials and basically marketing performance measurement, things like that. It's been going really well over the past year and a half. A lot of good feedback from it. It started off
on that because you decided to go beyond just reading and having text to having a podcast of your own. What's that?
Yeah. So the podcast just started earlier this year, and it's called Measure Up, and a little bit broader than just marketing mix modeling. It's just marketing measurement in general. But of course, there are a lot of episodes that are about marketing mix modeling too. If you've listened to this episode and can't get enough and you want to hear more, then by all means, go listen to some of those. Even
further down the rabbit hole. And I understand that you've done something recently that will make it far easier for people to get a hold of you and talk to you about their issues with measurement. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the most exciting thing that's happened to me in the last couple of weeks is that I decided to take the leap and start my own company. So Causal Analytics, where my goal is to help CMOs make smarter decisions with their marketing budgets. So we can do marketing mix modeling. We can help with experimentation. We can help answer attribution related questions. And that is at causal.com, spelled CAUZLE.com.
That's right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, you have no doubt given people ways that they can think about how they measure their funnel so that they can make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.